For the latest top tips, reviews and advice, please subscribe below.
Hello and welcome to Attwoolls Camping and Leisure with me, Mike. Today we're giving you a bit of advice on basically what to take on Duke of Edinburgh Award. So what we've got here is pretty much all the contents that you should take away with you, and my colleague here, Sophie, will basically go through about how to pack it, what to pack, and kind of why we actually are packing it. So if you are going away for the first time, doing your bronze or even silver or gold, there may be some certain things that you're a bit unsure about why you need it, or necessarily what to take. And one of the things that's critical is you don't take too much stuff, which that's why, again, having sort of a limited size bag, something like a sort of 60 litre, or sort of 50, 55 litres is normally more ample. The less room you've got, the less stuff you have to take with you. So we're going to go through sort of item by item and sort of talk about obviously first of all why we're packing it. So probably in terms of where we're starting with a bag, what's probably the most fundamental part that you would put in the bottom of the bag?
That's dependent on the person. Me personally, I always prefer putting my sleeping bag in the bottom because it's in its own enclosed area inside a dry bag itself. So like what we've got here, it's already in its dry bag, but that's roughly how big you would like a sleeping bag to be. Anything bigger than that and you are really going to struggle for space, and also the bigger the sleeping bag the heavier it is, which doesn't really make it ideal. Obviously the less weight you have the better. So first thing I would put in is sleeping bag. So this one here is a 3-season bag made by Van Gogh. Van Gogh do a good selection of DV recommended kit, including sleeping bags. It also has built in on this one compression straps, which you can easily make it nice and small. This one's already tightened down quite a bit, but you've got a lot of good leeway there to make it as small as possible and as compact as possible, so you can save as much space. But this will do any temperature really that you're going to see throughout your DV experience.
And the important thing with having the compression strap is really the fact that even if you're not the best at putting it away, you can quite literally just ram it inside the sack and then compress it down to make it as small as possible. There's always one of those things that when you get a sleeping bag out, you always struggle to get the thing back in, especially if you're not really used to how it all works. So yeah, by definitely having the compression strap on there is a really key feature of it. Definitely.
They also have any sleeping bag that you would want for DV. They're mummy shape, which is good for heat circulation as well. There's not going to be many loose air pockets to get you cold in the night, and they have adjustable hoods so you can really get yourself snuggled in and nice and warm. But they also tend to have double zips, so if you do get hot in the night, you can always open it at the bottom, let your feet out, cool yourself down a little bit. So packing the bag, I've put mine inside a dry bag. Personally, the best advice I was ever given was put your roll mat, your spare clothes and your sleeping bag in a spare dry bag. This isn't essential, but it covers you for all bases. If you're caught in really bad weather, the last thing you want is a wet sleeping bag for when you're sleeping that night. So if you've got those 3 things inside a separate sleeping bag, it would cost you a little bit more money, but you're better off to be safe at the end of the night. So me personally, that's going in the bottom pocket here.
The other advantage of dry bags is the fact that it's not just a one-purpose use. You can more than happily use this for other times. So if you're going down to the beach or generally on holiday, dry bags are a great essential thing to have regardless, especially if you're looking to go away travelling. I know when I always go away, it's so I can store my dirty washing in, or it's just got endless amounts of purposes. So it's not one of those things that is kind of over, quite a bit of a bugbear really is a DV, to do the whole Duke of Edinburgh. It's not cheap. It's really good, but putting things to extra uses after you only do, say, your bronze or or your silver, you've got a lot more kit you can use here later on afterwards.
You can get all different sizes as well. So that one right there, that was a 12 litre, which is anything between a 10 and a 15 litre you'd probably be able to fit a sleeping bag into. You can get smaller ones, so again what my colleague just said, ideal for if you do any other sort of sports at all, really, you could put your phone and your wallet in there if you wanted to, put it inside your normal backpack. And then we do larger bags like this, and they go up and up and up in size to full pack liners. So again, this one is 20 litre, so that's ideal for all of your clothing that you're going to be taking.
I think personally I prefer having smaller bags rather than one big pack liner, just because you've got everything's then separate. So if you know, it just means that again, finding things inside the bag becomes a lot easier when you've got sort of one main opening at the bottom and one main opening at the top. You're not suddenly open up a separate bag to rummage through that. It's just all segregated quite nicely.
It does help as well if your bag, a lot of backpacks, this one doesn't, but you can get backpacks that have got a side zip. So it would, if you had a pack liner, it makes the side zip useless, really. So you're paying for a really, really good handy feature, which you're not going to be able to use if you've got a pack liner. So next item, I would probably put the sleeping mat in. So it depends on what sort of sleeping mat you're getting. This one here is a self-inflating. So this is the size that it is packed down completely. It's really handy to have a self-inflating mat because they offer a little bit more comfort. They are bigger and they are, well, not necessarily bigger, but they're bulkier and heavier than, say, a standard roll mat. This is really, really light and quite long. So this you would probably attach either on the bottom of the bag or on the top of the bag, but they're not very comfortable. So especially for when you're doing bronze and you're not really sure what you're going to be getting yourself into, you're better to have a really good night's sleep on something like this and be comfortable and be fresh the next day. And they're also a lot better at insulating.
Yeah.
A lot better. They tend to have, the actual makeup of them, they tend to have foil in them, so it actually insulates you rather than it just being a piece of foam.
And it goes back to that same thing we're talking about, you know, it's never use afterwards. That one I've used, I use mostly to sleep on friends' floors if I'm staying over the house or something like that. It's just an extra purpose if you've got guests staying over, or generally you just want to do camping later on in life. It's a great extra to have, and like I said, it's something that doesn't take an awful lot of space in the house, let alone when you chuck it inside of a rucksack. So, again, put that in a dry bag just to keep that, again, sleeping equipment nice and, well, not wet if the worst came to shove. I mean,
Bear with me just a minute.
One thing to bear in mind is that you... Oh, nice little bug.
Sorry, there was a spider on the bag.
One thing to bear in mind is even though we're putting stuff into dry bags, you still need some sort of rain cover to go over a rucksack. This is basically because the material that you have might be some cases might be sort of waterproof or water resistant, but the seams aren't. So really, some good bags, like a lot of the Vanguard ones, will have a separate rain cover in the bottom. And when you've obviously filled the bag up, you literally pop that over the top, like so. And then that is basically your rain protection. Like you see, as you can see, because it fits over the top, it's not going to be 100% thorough. That's why having your main core items in something like a dry bag really does help. A lot of bags sometimes don't come with that included as a feature, so it's something you can quite happily, inexpensively buy as an extra. So that's always one thing to consider. But overall, I think it's, for me, that main thing, having the rain sack sort of cover is a big, big point. So now we've got the sling bag in itself. We're going to put the self-inflating mat or your roll mat inside that way. And again, using the dry bags just makes sure it's all safe and secure. I mean, one thing to bear in mind, there are certain things that probably you would consider for an individual person to have, and then some which you would have as your team or your, would split up and have in each item. So what we've kind of gone through so far is just the main two core items for yourself. But there is sort of a range that sits next to me here, which is more meant as a group, so you'd share carrying these items as well. I mean, the main sort of core thing, I suppose, that you would share is something like the tents.
Definitely, it'd probably be split fly sheet and poles and then tent inner. But if it was between two of you, if it was three of you, then you could have fly sheet, poles, and the inner tent split between the three of you that way as well.
Everyone shares it, so not one person's having to take the bulk. So what would be the next thing we're chucking in our rucksack?
So the next thing is mainly probably your clothing. So what I've got in here is pretty much with the exception to a couple of things, is pretty much everything that you would need for your D&V trip. So it's always worth preparing for cold weather, because you're better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So on most lists you'll find a hat and gloves, and I always carry some sort of neck scarf as well, just as an extra layer. They can be quite handy just to cover up as a sun hat as well, if you caught out that way.
I mean, the classic example of that is like a buff. You always see buffs and anything like that, so it's always fun. In fact, you go one on my wrist now, you use it as a sweatband, or it's just got multiple different purposes, really.
So you're always going to need your spare socks. Generally, you've got 2 pairs there, so in we go. What's best to have with socks?
Shoes.
Now, you're always after a wool sock is always better. It's really good for wicking. It doesn't have to be 100% wool, just something with a wool content in it. It's really good for wicking sweat away from your feet. At the same time, if the worst does happen and your boots start leaking, you do tend to have warmer feet with wool socks than you would with, say, bamboo or synthetic socks, because they actually do trap the heat around your foot when it's wet. So, you know, you're not going to be, you might have wet feet, but they're not going to be cold, basically. But it's quite essential to have a good pair of socks. What you'll also need is some sort of thermal base layer. So what I've got on here underneath our shirts is a long sleeve merino. Any sort of merino or synthetic base layer would do the job perfectly fine. This one here is another version, it's just sleeveless. So you probably want to take something like that and double it up as nightwear to save you taking extra stuff to sleep in at night. Just use your thermals so you're not having to take too much weight and too much bulk.
So a lot of people will say, can you use your skins, like for your sporting skins?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
don't have to go out and buy new kit, you could actually use something you've already got. And it's the same with a lot of things, you know, like a mid-layer or fleece. You know, you don't have to go out and buy a brand new one specifically for this. It's something you might have in your wardrobe sitting here not untouched.
A lot of it is transferable kit, and it depends on who you're doing your D&V with as well. Some people are quite happy for you to wear sports leggings instead of walking trousers, because they're really quick drying, they're comfortable to wear, and that's pretty much what a walking trouser is. They're very quick drying, they're designed to be comfortable. Walking trousers tend to be a little bit more water resistant, but after they've been washed a couple of times, it loses that water resistance anyway, unless you keep up with the proofing. So actual sports leggings can be used as well, but it'd be worth checking with your actual D&V leader whether or not they'd be happy for that. Next to that, you'd probably wear some sort of tech t-shirt if it's quite warm. You don't want to have a cotton t-shirt because it'll stick to you, it doesn't wick away sweat, it will get really wet, and you might be okay when you're warm and when you're actually moving, but when you take your pack off, most of the time you'll have a sweat patch on your back. So when you take your bag off, you want that to be drying as quick as possible. If it's a cotton t-shirt, it's just going to linger and it's going to take a long time to dry, and you've stopped moving, you're going to get cold pretty quickly. So at least with a technical top, you're going to dry pretty quick. But after that, you want some sort of mid layer. So what I've got here is just a basic micro fleece. You can get these pretty much anywhere. They vary in prices, they vary in features. This one here has got lots of features on it. It's got wrist cuffs, it's got a chest pocket, it's got pockets here, and it's got a hood. But you can just get a plain fleece that's just got a 3/4 zip, very thin, no other features, cheap and cheerful, and it'll get you through it perfectly fine. And the thing with micro fleece is it's really quick drying as well.
Yeah, again, it's something like things like we're talking about hats and stuff like that. If you do skiing or generally just a normal beanie, you know, it's just at least something's better than nothing at the end of the day. So yeah, again, we've packed that in a nice dry bag. And like I say, there's probably certain items you want to definitely pack in a dry bag, and you can go to the extreme level of chucking everything in a dry bag. So I think really it's the main core things you would do, like Sophie said, is to go and doing your, you know, your sleeping equipment and mostly your clothes.
I'm going to check that I'm still recording.
That's cool. Moving on to, so that's, like I say, more items about yourself. And then also what goes next with sort of clothing as we're talking, it's more lines of your cooking equipment, as well as your keeping yourself hydrated with water bottles. So, I mean, most of the time with your group kit, you will have some sort of cooking apparatus. So, most commonly, a Trangia. Brilliant bit of kit. You know, one thing you do say is people who have these absolutely adore them, and it gives you all that you need to do. One thing you will have to look at is a normal Trangia will run off MEFs, so methylated spirits, and you need some sort of safety bottle to carry it in, mainly because when you're topping it up, you can't pour directly from the bottle. It needs to be in something like this, a proper Trangia, Duke of Edinburgh recommended kit. It's much safer that way. The part of the Trangia actually, you've got different essence to it, so you'll have a little brass burner in there, and that's for the methylated spirits. A lot of people will actually convert those over to gas with some sort of like gas burner that Trangia do, and yet again it means you can run off these canisters, which I think in terms of usability friendly, they're a lot easier to use and have a lot less problems. Trangia, you can also look at options of a separate unit rather than the brass one for MEFs for something like this, and this actually uses biogel, so it's a much safer way of using it. Again, it means you can store the gel inside of there, so it's an aluminium tin. You have to buy extra to this Trangia, and you can literally just light it up, let it burn and top it up, and again it's in like a squishy little packet, so it allows you just to do as you need to. And actually it also doubles up as hand sanitizer as well, so as soon as you instantly blow it out, you can then use it as hand sanitizer to keep yourself clean, so it's sort of two purposes in one. But most, like I say, with most of the Trangia kits, it quite simply slots together, and then you can quite happily cook for yourself or the group on there. Like I said, you normally share this between a group of people, so it might be 3 in a group, 4 in a group, and it just all uses simple enough. And you've got, it's one thing, yeah, again, it's one that gets to learn to use these, and it's kind of getting at the whole joys of DAV as you get back to basics and learn how to use this sort of kit. But yeah, in essence, like I said, it's quite a nice little tool, and something you would share between everyone else. So like I said, with this you would share this with a group, so you've got your MEFs or your burner, your actual Trangia itself, and then you've got other kits as well, most importantly probably
Tents.
the tents.
So depending on what sort of tent, how many people it's designed for, again we've already gone through how you split it. This one here, again you probably do fly sheet and poles and in a tent if it was 2 of you. So I would probably attach this on the outside of the tent, or use either, you've got plenty of straps on outside of the bag, sorry. You've got plenty of straps that you can actually attach things to on your bag. So you've got 2 on the sides, you've got 2 on the bottom. Some even have straps on the top, which this one doesn't, but you can get straps that go over the top as well that look very similar to these here, just thin straps just for you to attach on. So with something like this, I would probably attach this either down the bottom or on the side with this bag.
So yeah, again, another group kit includes things like a small little windshield, which again twins up with the Trangia just to keep it all safe, and means you actually get a good cooking burning on the go rather than having the wind on a windy day like today blowing out all the time. And one of the most vital points that you'll carry, your map, so you know where you are, where you're off to. Majority of what you get given on Duke of Edinburgh isn't waterproof, so you will need some sort of map casing to store it in. That way, with it is chucking it down with rain, you can still navigate yourself without having to just completely destroy the map and lose sense of where you are. OS maps do have a waterproof version, but like I said, majority of what you find is what you get given isn't waterproof. But like I say, it's one thing you can sort of even it up between the rest of the people in your little group and work out who's taking what.
So what we've got here is a storm shelter. This is probably going to be classed as group kit. You're either going to be asked, which is more than likely to be asked, for a survival bag, which is basically a 1-person version of a storm shelter, bar the fact that you can't cover your head up completely. So a survival bag, you basically shimmy yourself in and do that, pretty much. It's bright orange and easy to find. Generally they're just made out of plastic, so it'll be waterproof and it'll shield you from the weather. That is what a storm shelter would do, but a storm shelter generally is for 2 people and more. So it's basically a tent without poles. You unzip it, everybody climbs on in, you zip it back up, it's bright orange. Anybody who's looking for anybody would be able to find you, and it will keep you dry and shed body heat, keep you warm.
It's one of those things, like I say, it's just a case of emergency really. It's not really something you would find or have to use very often at all. It's just there, as we said, if you need it.
Next to that, again under optional kit or group kit, would be a different stove to the Trangia. It'd be the Vango stove. So this is basically a little gas stove, which a lot of people tend to buy their own little gas stoves anyway, because it tends to be a little bit quicker to eat at the end of the day. So if you're not sharing a Trangia, so you can buy yourself a tiny little gas stove, but they tend to come in little boxes like that. Screws on top of a gas bottle and will come to the boil within a few minutes.
Separate sort of thing. And like I say, it's just a case of if you're getting hungry, it's better, you're not waiting on, everyone else to cook their food. It just gives you the ability to sort yourself out and then also help everyone else speed their cooking up as well. So it's like I say, it's not a must-have, but it's a nice thing to have if you can spare the money for it.
Keeping in line with the cooking, what you'll probably be asked to get is dehydrated or boil in the bag food. So you've got 2 main brands. You've got your Adventure Food, which is dehydrated. This you just have to add boiling water to. And then we have things like this, which is boiling the bag food. So you'd bring your Trangia or your Vango up to the boil, bring your water up to the boil, fold your bag, stick it in, and I think these you have to wait a couple of minutes, 10 minutes maybe, and you're done, ready to eat. You can literally eat it out of the bag or transfer it into a bowl if you need to.
Actually, they're pretty good. I've not been unknown to be massively lazy on a night and not just taken a couple of those home from work and cooked them.
Right?
Believe it or not,
I've done that for lunch before.
That's the ultimate of laziness, because actually they come in loads of different types as well. You've got breakfast, lunch, and also dinner meals as well. There's also sort of puddings, and generally actually it's not really a meal I can think of that I've tried out of the whole range that I thought that's not really for me.
Other than beans, don't like beans.
Well, that's your own personal thing, but I know certainly like the pudding. Certainly, I think the
chocolate pudding and the sticky toffee tend to be they're
very rich, but then you need energy. You're walking all day, so that's where
it's a nice sweet treat, isn't it?
It is really nice.
Yeah.
And instead it moves on to keeping your energy up for the day. It's not a bad idea to snack while you're physically walking. So in mind of that, there are sort of numerous little things you can look at to keep yourself energetic.
So these 2, just a basic selection of energy bars. Anything that's designed to be an energy bar, very high in sugars, very high in proteins.
It's just to keep you it can be a long day's walking.
Yeah, keeps your momentum up and keeps your energy up.
Little sugar burst here and there is never a bad thing when you're using as much energy as you are.
And these are basically energy versions of Haribo. That's basically what they are. They're chewy little sweets, and they just give you a little bit more of a boost than just eating normal candies would. And then you can go on to things like Kendal mint cake, which
is the classics.
Yeah, everybody knows what Kendal mint cake is. If you don't, you need to try it. They do it plain and they do it in chocolate covered.
Which is my personal favourite.
Yeah, tastes just like After 8.
Yeah. But again, it's very high in sugar again, and just to keep yourself energy going. Because at the end of the day, you do find you need little bursts of hydration throughout the day when you're walking, and yet again, mini breaks just to enjoy yourself, and also just sort of stick again with the group. So food at the end of the day is very important for D&V because at the end of the day it's what keeps you going. I don't think you can really overeat. Well, you just struggle to overeat. I think,
you would
D&V.
easily burn it off with the weight that you're carrying as well. But on most backpacks, you tend to have little pockets on the waist strap. So what's really handy to do is put a couple of those in your pocket in the side. It means you don't even have to stop to eat.
No.
You can just pull it straight out. If you're feeling a little bit like you're lagging, pull it straight out, and there you go, munch away.
Chew on the go.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it's having accessible pockets where you can get hold of stuff, and it's like I said, it's not having someone having to get it out your pocket for you to eat, so you haven't got to rely on anyone else. And the same sort of principle when you're talking about water as well. You want something either like a hydration bladder, or ideally some sort of bottle which you can quite happily drink, and you notice different, somewhere that's again accessible, and you want to make sure you are well hydrated while you're on the trip.
So most bags will either have, this one's got enclosed pockets for water bottles, others tend to have actual sliding pockets that you can just put them in, but for argument's sake this one just slides straight into the pocket and then you zip it up. So your water's in there. You need to be taking at least 3 litres of water on your trip. Anything less than that you would struggle, especially if it's hot weather. You do want to be making sure you've got plenty of fluids. If you don't drink enough, you're going to be pretty miserable whilst doing your trip.
Because again, it's not only down drinking, but if you've got anything spare, you can always use it for cooking or anything like that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's multiple different purposes of it. So even if you don't generally drink a lot of water like I don't, I'm a bit of a camel in many ways, that I don't drink anything. But it's not only down to that, it's also down to, you could use it for washing. There's endless possibilities that you can use it for. And yet again, like I say, if you're thinking you've got to fill a fair amount of water in there for cooking on your trangia, in something like a mesh tin or the actual trangia stove itself, that's quite a bit of water you would require to cook it in. I mean, admittedly, you'll share that with the group and reuse the same water to heat everyone else's meals up, but it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah. So if you're not using a trangia and you're using a gas stove, you more than likely have a mess tin or some sort of cooking pot similar to this. So again, that's going to have to go in there as well, but there's plenty that you can fill that with to put it inside your bag. And obviously your essentials: mug, bowl and plate, quite obviously to eat your food from. Knives and forks are always a real good one. What you'll probably find is more going to get used most is your spoon, or you can just buy a spork or a other unbranded equivalent of.
And certain sort of Swiss Army knives and stuff like that will have forks and things on them as well, so you can use it as multi-purpose. Admittedly, like a Swiss Army knife is actually considered as an optional extra for D&V, but generally it's a handy tool to have regardless of whether you're doing D&V or not. And yet again, it's one of those things that can help you just generally with other bits and bobs in your life.
So Victorinox actually do a D&V recommended pocket tool. So your main difference with this is that it's actually got a rounded knife. So to obvious reasons with children, you don't want any seriously sharp instruments going in there, but it's a pretty handy piece of kit, and it's a really good starter kit as well for your son or your daughter that's doing Duke of Edinburgh and they want one.
The main thing again is making sure when you're packing it all in that you're making use of the space. So it's like putting different stuff inside cups into other things as well. So it's obviously space is a premium, so as much as you can pack in is the best way to do it. But you still need to have those ready to have items at a moment's grab if need be.
So another thing you're going to really need is matches and or a lighter, but more than likely they'll request matches. So what they'll request you to get is waterproof and windproof matches, which generally tend to come in a tub very similar to this one. That again, you can pop it inside your mug, pop it inside your bag, bury it away. Preferably keep it close to your cooking instruments. You don't want to be emptying all of your kit out. And with the trangia, you can just stick them inside the trangia itself, inside the bowl. moving on from that, you've got your first aid kit, and again, to go with that, emergency whistle. Now, pretty much most backpacks that are designed for actual backpacking have got a whistle just on the chest strap, but it's always handy to have one extra just in case, because some bags don't come with one. So that actually is a really handy thing to do, is to put it onto your backpack here, so it's actually hanging down right here. So if you do get yourself caught in a serious situation where you haven't got time to be struggling to find your whistle, it's right here, or again, if you can't get to this one, it's in a real good accessible place.
I mean, the thing is, every person will need a first aid kit as well, because it's not a case of one will do for a group, because you might not necessarily be with your group when something happens. And yet again, it's kind of a case also that some people might not have other stuff in their first aid kits with others do. So it's definitely worth having one each, for sure.
Definitely.
Same like with survival, obviously, you might not be with someone who's got one, or for some reason can't use their own.
Yeah. It could be silly little things as well, like you've just been split off from the group crossing a road or something silly like that. You do need to have your own. This one is a pocket version. You can get lots of different versions, but for what you need, you'd either probably need a Trek or the pocket. That would do the job quite easily. So again, that needs to be somewhere quite accessible. So personally, I would probably put that in your top pocket of your bag, so it's nice and easy to get to.
So we're shaping up with the bag. We're looking like we've got...
Yep, so pretty much we've got a fair bit in here at the moment. We've got your 2 pockets with your water in it. They're fairly evened out. The important thing is that your weight's distributed quite nicely. If you've got any seriously heavy items, keep them close to your back. But at the moment we've got this packed pretty nicely. I've got my food and my clothing on one side of the bag, and I've got my mat on the other side of the bag, so the weight's distributed quite nicely. Again, I'm going to have things like this in the top pocket, which would go alongside the waterproofs. So I've got my waterproofs inside another dry bag here. Not essential because they are waterproof, but again, you don't want the inside of your jacket or the inside of your trousers to be wet when you're putting them on. So I tend to keep that in the top pocket so I can easily grab it out and put them on quickly.
It's also, again, if it has been raining, you don't want to chuck your wet waterproofs with anything else,
Yeah,
do you?
handy to put them back in.
It is, and again, it's even if it's wet inside of there, it can seep through the bag and make something inside sort of damp or wet. So having a separate bag for it is quite a nice little thing. Generally, you find something like a Mac in a sack is quite a good one to look at, because they come in a little bag anyway, and they pack down quite small. So they do different trousers and jacket versions of those, which you can quite happily easily put on.
So another thing to have, you'll probably be requested to get torch and or head torch. So what I've got here is just a tiny little one, does the job quite nicely. That I would probably keep with pots, pans, anything. You're going to get that out when you set camp up, basically, so it's not essential it to be in a place where to get it. Head torch though, or actually going back on that, if you don't have a head torch, I would do the same as I'm about to do. Head torch I would put in the top pocket, so it is really easily to get to. If you're running late, you've got to your camp late and it's starting to get dark, you can easily get it out quickly. So again, I would put that in the top pocket. Or if you don't have a head torch, put your torch in your top pocket to get to quite easily. Right, so
We've got our cooking stuff to pack. So if we say we're going to take the tent, we're going to have another member of the team, we'll take our trangia,
Yep.
we'll take that out of the thing, and then we will also take
storm shelter.
and then someone else can have the map and the fluids. So like I say, if you've got 2 other people who can take that with items.
If we're working from Trangia, we don't need that.
Don't need that, that's fine.
Okay,
Put
so
those together,
that would go with the Trangia as well.
it's fine. Trangia, it's going to sit in there.
Okay, so there's lots of space still inside this bag down here. So plate's nice and flat, that can squeeze in there. bowl and mug, I'm just going to rest in the top here because it's quite easy to fill with bits once you've got your pack standing up on end. Spoons and stuff, there's still space down here, so actually I can put that down there in with the sleeping bag and it's just tucked away nicely. The final important thing that we haven't covered is personal hygiene. So
Very important.
You'll be asked to buy a Trek towel or microfiber towel. Quick drying basically is what it is. This one rolls up quite nicely. Majority of them tend to come in little bags. This one's just in a roll case. Really, really quick drying. They do the job quite nicely and you can get all sorts of different sizes. So this one is a really decent size. Made by a very popular company. They do a really good selection of towels. There are a couple of other companies other than Life Venture that do good trekking towels as well. But as long as it's quick drying and or microfiber, it doesn't really matter. Very small as well. The smaller the better really, because any size towel will still do the same job. It's still going to dry you.
So how often are you going to really use it? Not really a huge amount.
You're probably only going to use it maybe the once when you actually get to camp. Depending on where you're camping as well, you might have the luxury of having facilities such as a shower, so you might use it at night and then again in the morning. It completely depends on where you're going to be, but you're probably only going to use it once, maybe twice for the entire trip. But the other thing is, if you do use it in the morning and you're setting off camp and you don't want to put it wet inside your bag, you can just hang it from the outside of your bag, let it dry as you're walking. That's no problem.
They do dry really quickly.
Yeah,
I mean,
they do.
I've used one for travelling all the time, and I wouldn't go anywhere without it. Yeah, again, it's just a bit of, it's just so handy to have small, quick dries, and you can pretty much hang it anywhere, and it will be dry. You know, not instantaneously, but pretty much as good as.
Fairly quickly. So that, and we've got some all-purpose soap here, so you can use that for clothing, you can use it for washing yourself, you can use it for washing out your food containers. You can literally, it says all-purpose, it is all-purpose. You can use it for everything. So those two I would probably keep separate in another dry bag. You don't want your soap to leak anywhere, and at the same time you don't want your towel to be seeping, although it'd be quick drying. If you're putting it away straight away, you don't want it to be seeping onto anything else. I'm going to put the storm shelter at the top of the bag so it's really easy to get to. And that's all of your essential kit. There is some other items which you might choose to take. First of all being toilet roll and a trowel. I really don't need to explain this, do I? And I don't need to give a demo either.
Rather you not.
Of how that works, but for obvious reasons you may wish to take either of those. Again, it depends on time of year you're going. You could always choose to take hand warmers as well, completely again optional. Glow sticks, these ones depends again on who you're doing your DV with. Some people request that you take them, some don't really mind if you take them or not. They're going to be used for an emergency situation really, if you're going to if you're caught out and it's starting to get dark, or if you need to get someone's attention. So again, that's optional kit, but I would always take one just in case.
Not for a rave.
No. Okay, so carrying on with non-essential kit, we've got walking poles. So these are what I would probably class as a luxury item. They're really, really great if you do have them, because they actually encourage you to keep your back straight and to keep your posture really well whilst you're walking, which can be really hard to control yourself when you're carrying this much weight. So you're going to be carrying in around 10 kilos, possibly more. You'll be doing really, really well if it's less than 10 kilos. So most walking poles tend to extend to lots of different sizes. So they're multiple use for multiple people for different heights. So if you wanted to, if one of you had a set of walking poles and someone else was struggling in your team, you could always just hand one over and they could use it as well. They are really nice to have, but again, they're really not essential. They can be quite expensive as well if you get a really good set. I mean, You can get some that are quite cheap and cheerful, which if they're only going to get used the one time, then you can sort of justify it. But if you know you're going to get a lot of use out of them, or if there's another family member that's going to do DFE, or maybe if you've got another family member that hikes, they are really handy to have.
I think certainly if you've got sort of weak knees as well, I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that it does become quite apparent. It's not so much the uphill, it's more the downhill. It's also taking take the strain and the weight out of it a bit, and the physical impact of going downhill. That's one thing I've certainly noticed makes quite a bit of difference.
No, I have to use them for my left knee going downhill.
Just the left one.
Just the left one. But they can attach onto the bag really, really easily. So this one's designed to have 2 walking poles. So what you do is you put your end in, you twist, there's an elastic tab here, pop it round and tighten, and then again you do the same with this one here, pop it in, twist and attach, and that's your walking poles attached to your bag. Now the last thing that I'm going to cover here is attaching the tent, and I am still going to attach this even though we've got a self-inflating in there. I'm just going to attach it to the bag just to give you an idea of what it would look like once it's on. This, again, you do want to try and keep it dry if you have gone for this option, but getting a dry bag for it, I understand that would be extra cost. So depending on who you're doing your DV with, they might just accept you using just a plain bin bag, bin liner for this, see as it's going on the outside of your bag. So do the tent first. This backpack actually comes with an elastic strap which you can adjust, so it's got little hooks, so you can adjust it all across the backpack. So I'm going to use this to attach the tent. It's actually got straps going across, so I'm actually going to try and weave it in so that it's going through the straps to keep it nice and secure.
And like I said at the start of the video, it's kind of a case of maybe not one person will be responsible for the whole tent. It may be a case that you do break it up into smaller parts for the team to carry. So there are obviously endless different possibilities of who might take what, and also the size of it. I mean, what we're using here is sort of a fairly small pack. What you do find is that maybe what the school supply you, or you look at purchasing yourself, maybe a little bit big in capacity. So it's definitely worth considering different methods of attaching it on, and obviously, again, different sizes you may have to adjust for.
Another thing that you can find that will come in quite useful is buying like tiny, cheap and cheerful carabiners. You don't need to spend a lot of money on them, they don't need to be climbing grade, but you can use them to attach stuff like the tent. If you didn't have this bungee cord, you could actually use this to put it onto the tent and then attach it to this loop here on the bag, and it's attached. So there are ways around it. These sort of things can be really handy. Again, non-essential.
A lot of people use carabiners for clipping like a water bottle out on the external side of things.
Yeah.
It's like I said, as Sophie said, there's endless possibilities of what you can use them for. But the main thing is obviously when you're attaching on a bag like she's doing now, is making sure it's just secure, and as it's, like I said, by weaving it in, just means that even if once you're moving or going downhill, and there's sort of a lot of impact, there's a lot of movement on the bag itself, that it's secure and it's not going to go anywhere. Looks pretty good.
Right, so that is now going absolutely nowhere. So moving the bag up, I'm going to do this top bit up. Some backpacks have this feature that I'm about to show you, some don't, so it depends on the backpack that you're buying, but this bit here you want to make sure that drawstring is done up as well. Just keeps everything nice and snugly together. And then you have another clip here, pops into there, keeps the top of your backpack nice and shut. So shutting the top of the backpack, you want to make sure that all of your straps are nice and tight, so nothing's going to move around inside the bag. You can even, there's got side straps here. Make sure all of those are all attached and done up nice and tightly. Right, the final thing I am going to do is attach this on. So every backpack will have these tiny little clips, whether it be at the bottom or it be at the top.
I suppose that look is also the classic, probably what of when you think of DAV is what you see, you know, a backpack and then that strapped over at the top at the bottom. But in essence, that's pretty much everything there. So you've got everything you need in that single backpack, and like I said, we've still got room to spare. So even if you sort of slightly go over pack and don't go to the level we have here, you should have sort of tons of room inside of it.
It has also got the option to have a bladder inside here as well. If you wish to go right down that route, there's a little hole just here where you can loop it through, have your tube and your little nozzle going down the side of your shoulder if you did want to go for a bladder as well.
Kind of like a Camelback, but a non-branded version, because I mean, the Camelback, as brilliant as it is, are quite expensive to purchase. So a general sort of bladder will be normally sufficient. But yeah, really, that's a kind of an idea of every single item that will go into the bag and it going into the bag. Of course, you can check out a slightly quicker video of us just putting all the kit into the bag and talking through the same points again. But if you have any questions, of course, do ask us, or more importantly, come into the shop and sort of see us, and we're happy to talk you through all the different bits and items as you need to. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about DAV from us here at Attwoolls.